From Book More Women, this is Measured. I'm Carmel Holt. In this podcast, we're digging into how the music industry really works using data and the lived experience of artists and industry professionals. We're exploring how decisions are made, who holds the keys to power and access, and how the system can work better for everyone. Because real change happens when what matters is measured. In this, our first episode, we're starting with what we know best, music festivals. And as you may know, Book More Women began as an Instagram account tackling the inequities of music festivals through data and visuals. Founded in 2018, Book More Women has now grown to 20,000 followers and has tracked the gender imbalance across 500 festivals. Joining me now is the woman who started it all, Abbey Carbonneau, the founder and executive director of Book More Women. Hi, Abbey.
Hi, Carmel. Thank you so much. I'm excited to start exploring the music festival industry in this new way.
So let's start with why music festivals? Like, what is so special about them to you?
Just personally, to start, I've always just loved festivals as the idea of a place of community and shared musical discovery. You know, for the most part, everyone is there to engage with live music, and that has the power to bring a diverse set of people together for one purpose, or to give a unique group of people, a feeling of safety and belonging. Like with the Lilith Fair or the Afropunk festivals, the event serves as a place of connection for communities that didn't really have many designated music spaces. So just for example, here's a clip of an attendee, Chanel, speaking to Teen Vogue about that feeling at Afropunk.
This is like one of the few spaces where I'm not an anomaly. Like, I'm just a normal person in this space. And I think with all that's been happening in terms of communities of color thinking about self-care, like coming to events like this where you see people who are like-minded and who look like you and you feel less like an other, which we usually do in this society. So I think it's a great way for people to just feel good about themselves.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. So how did your love for music festivals become Book More Women?
Well, Book More Women started with one disappointing lineup announcement in 2018. And in the middle of a Twitter argument, I erased the male names from the poster to support my point. And after that, with just some basic photo editing skills, a little social media know-how, and probably a lot of persistence, the graphics started catching on. And from there, I spent all my spare time providing the gender breakdown data across hundreds of festivals, intentionally without commentary for the industry to use, for artists, for fans, because I think that inequity must be exposed first in order for it to be addressed. And what's great about festival posters is it's also a really convenient visual stand-in for the music industry itself. And there's, an enormous number of industry decisions that go into that end result of what you see on the poster.
Right.
So they're really one of the clearest windows that we have into who is finding success in mainstream music. When a festival lineup drops, you're not just seeing who's playing that festival, but you're seeing who's been believed in, who was being resourced and funded, who is given access to these spaces, who's considered worth this slot and this investment.
So what could access to these often out-of-reach opportunities mean to an artist?
Well, beyond the visibility of a festival stage and the fee, playing festivals can be huge for up-and-coming artists, especially. They allow you to play to not only your own audience, but also a potential new audience at the same time. And the momentum that you can receive from playing a successful set at a music festival just can't be replicated anywhere else. For example, web searches for lesser-known artists at the Primavera Sound festivals in Spain triple in the weeks following their appearances. Wow. So this is like a long-lasting effect. And, as we all know, streaming can't be relied on anymore as a significant income for musicians. So most artists need a live audience to survive. And for marginalized artists without major label backing or agency representation, festivals, could be the only way to really get that kind of audience at scale. So that festival slot isn't just a single show. It could be a career-changing opportunity. And right now, those opportunities are going overwhelmingly to men.
So What happened when the edited posters and data started being shared? What was the reaction?
Well, the first thing I noticed was how much the post seemed to resonate with artists in particular. Some of the first followbacks and comments that I received were musicians that I had already listened to and respected, like Margot Price, Cam Franklin of The Suffers, Sarah Watkins.
Well, so what did that support mean to you at the time?
I mean, that was huge. The response and encouragement from artists was what kept me going and knowing that I was on the right track. When I did receive that like harsh or critical reactions from like the industry or fans of festivals, remembering the artists that were already in my corner was just huge. And there was, a moment a few months in where I knew I wasn't allowed to give up anymore when Brandi Carlile hopped in my DMs and told me to keep doing the work. So that was a huge moment. And later that year, I was showing a video where she was at an Amazon Music Americana Fest roundtable, and she addressed her newly announced festival, Girls Just Want a Weekend.
It reminds me, you got a big event, concert, all ladies coming up, right?
Yeah.
Is that in Mexico?
It's in Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that all come about?
Well, have you seen that Instagram Book More Women?
No.
You seen
Yes.
it? It's so amazing. It's just kind of, it's gently shone a light on the way that mainstream festivals, not just mainstream festivals, but all festivals and radio, and we're in, I think, a little bit of a dark period in the music industry of excluding women in a way that seems really noticeable to me. And festivals are one of those places. So like Book More Women takes these festival posters and that you've all seen, and they take the men's names off the posters and they leave just the women. They leave just blank pages.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think artists felt like their experience had been put into a visual form. And, now they were backed with this ammo that was straightforward and hard to ignore.
And so you mentioned some of the pushback from other festivals. How did the industry react when the posters started circulating, your edited posters?
Well, the festival reaction was definitely mixed. Early on, there were a few moments that I definitely remember, being blocked by a couple festivals on social media. I did at one point receive a threat of a cease and desist. I just heard every possible excuse and reasoning you could think of. It wasn't all negative. I think that independent festivals and smaller festivals really appreciated, seeing this kind of breakdown and being sort of celebrated for what they were doing as well. And once it started catching on, Book More Women received press coverage, and I did an interview, for example, with RollingStone.com, and from that point, I think I heard a lot more along the lines of what the Lollapalooza promoter in that piece had said. Things like, sometimes you think you're hitting all your diversity goals, but you might not be, and that Book More Women was kind of a reality check. Essentially measuring the gender diversity and sharing it publicly and transparently changed the conversation. It made it harder to dismiss the issue as anecdotal or subjective or, the problem in one genre or one company or one location, that it was really widespread and it was everywhere.
And you started this with no music industry background, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I was a music fan, music festival fan, and I definitely learned as I went along and dug this weird little back hole into the music industry. And, the support that, like I said, artists had shown me really helped, knowing that I was doing something that was helping them and not just something that I thought was right, but that they thought was what needed to be done too.
But you're coming at it from the perspective of a music fan first.
Yeah, as a fan. And I've been in some industry rooms the last few years, and there's been a few times where it's felt like the industry sort of forgets that it doesn't exist without fans, and that fans just aren't a number, and that fans have lives without infinite bank accounts. But when people used to ask who I was, I'd often just said, "Oh, I'm just a fan." But I tried to consciously stop saying the just part, because I think there's a lot of power in being a fan. And like I said, this all can't exist without them. Some of the best conversations with artists or other people in the industry that I've had, they may be deep in this world, but they're also still very obviously fans. And those have been, some of my favorite people to talk to.
So you've been tracking the numbers for nearly 8 years now, and you published an annual progress report, and your 2025 report actually just came out. What can you share with us about where we stand today compared to the beginning of when you started this in 2018?
Well, the good news is we're doing much better than in 2018 when we started. So if you kind of look at the biggest multi-genre festivals in the US and combine all the numbers, so Coachella, Lollapalooza, Bonnaroo, the percent of artists with at least one woman or non-binary member climbed from 28% in 2018 to 40% in 2022. But the bad news is it's basically stalled since then. It's been stuck at that 40% number. And in fact, in this latest report in 2025, we found that there was actually a decrease for the first time. And I think that a lot of us sort of felt this. But once we got the numbers, we confirmed that it did go down to about 37% among those large festivals. And 8 of those 9 major festivals had fewer gender diverse artists last year. And when we dig in and count every member of every act of the festivals, which is our real current methodology, only 22% of the musicians on stage were women at these large festivals, and 1% were non-binary.
In 2025?
In 2025.
Wow.
Yeah. And you could find the full report, which includes headliner data, transgender representation, genre breakdowns, and more at bookmorewomen.com.
So what does that decrease in 2025 tell you?
I think it told me that visibility and pressure alone aren't enough anymore. And that, the progress is fragile and can stall or reverse without, real structural change. If we're only putting these Band-Aids on top, it can easily go back to how it was. And we know that the inequity isn't coming from one bad decision, one bad actor. It's coming from this system that goes across the entire music industry that, rewards familiarity and relationships, works to minimize risk, and just sort of recycled a lot of the same opportunities. And, I think for artists, it isn't about percentages. This is the thing that I think can get lost sometimes is it's about lost income, lost opportunities, and careers that don't even get a chance to get off the ground. So, we've measured the problem, we carried the conversation, and we got this conversation into some of the biggest rooms in the industry. But it's clear that the pressure that we've been applying through this method is not enough. And so we're ready to do more.
So let's talk about what's next for Book More Women.
Yeah, so this year we're taking a big step to move from presenting the data to really putting it to work. The inequality we're seeing doesn't start or end with festivals. The posters make it visible, but the inequality we're seeing doesn't start or end with festivals. The posters make it visible, but gender inequity is an industry-wide systemic issue. So we're designing programs to work within the industry and outside of it simultaneously to address this. And our mission is to challenge the status quo. We are here to elevate underrepresented voices and shape a more equitable ecosystem by using the data-driven advocacy that we've already built, as well as narrative change and community-centered support. And to enable this direct work, we're now fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, which will allow us to collect tax-deductible donations towards our mission while we pursue our own 501c3 status.
As an organization that's fiscally sponsored, I think it's important that we explain what fiscal sponsorship is, because I know that when I announced that I had gotten fiscally sponsored, people said congratulations, as though I had just stumbled on a big pot of money. So just in brief, let's talk about fiscal sponsorship and why that's a stepping stone on your road to being 501c3.
Yeah, absolutely. Being fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas essentially means that we are a project of their organization, which is a 501c3. And in that way, we are able to fundraise in a way that we weren't before, while they also give oversight to us, take care of a lot of the administrative things that will come with our own status. So it really made sense as a sort of transition period for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining that. So what specific programs can we look forward to seeing?
Yeah, so first, something we're super excited about is called Booked, which is our festival partnership program. So we will partner with festivals who want to improve their representation and are willing to hold themselves accountable. So we provide the festival with their historical data. They make a specific public commitment to a meaningful increase in gender representation the following year based on that data. And then, we spotlight their pledge and then spotlight an independent artist on their lineup as part of our coverage. And it's a way to celebrate festivals that are actually putting in the work to improve and encourage that at the same time. And we're launching with the pilot version, but the full version that we're building towards will actually also include a direct opportunity for artists where the partner festival will provide us with a lineup slot, and then Book More Women will hold open submissions to find an independent, marginalized artist who will fit this festival and give them a backdoor direct pathway to play a stage that, they otherwise wouldn't have had access to, most likely not having the right connections or the right, framework behind them. So that's part of a couple things that we're very committed to, which is, to directly support artists and to create alternative pathways in the industry. And beyond that program, we have, we're planning workshops, guides, and other resources that can provide independent artists and others looking to get into the industry with knowledge, skills, and opportunities that are often gatekept or inaccessible, or you don't quite know them until you're in the know and you're in this network. And, as we thought about what we want to cover in these, we spoke directly to artists and asked them things like, what right now would be the most helpful for you to learn? And maybe it's accounting, maybe it's knowing what to look for in a release form or something. And then other artists, we asked, what has been most helpful for you in the past to get over barriers, to get to where you want to be. And we've sort of incorporated all this into our future plans. And so, we're going to continue our data collection, of course, the tracking, the reporting, expanding this eventually to go beyond festivals is the idea. And then, of course, there's this podcast, Measured.
Congratulations on all that. It sounds so incredible. And you're in good company. There's a lot of other great organizations working on gender equity in the music industry. And I thought it would be helpful to shine a light on what makes Book More Women's new initiatives different.
Yeah, we've definitely been inspired by so many organizations, and we look forward to working with them as part of this big coalition and ecosystem and, filling the gaps and, creating power in numbers. But I think what makes Book More Women special is, of course, the use of data and statistics is the big one. We have the lineups, but we're also looking to apply that foundation wherever we can to, inspire and create change. So we're building ways to work with the industry powers to better use data to solve inequities. And when the industry doesn't want to work with us, to publish that data anyway. And another thing that's very important to us is to stay grounded in the community. Everything we've created, as I said, has been informed by the experience of working artists and others that we've talked to, ultimately uplifting marginalized artists and redesigning an industry that values them is our vision. So we won't lose sight of that working artist, that mother of three who is, working a day job just to pursue her calling at night. That's the people that we think of. Our board of directors, for example, is a majority working artists. They have other jobs or projects that allow their calling for music to continue. And they understand the intersectional barriers and the hustle of being an artist and what it takes. And so working with them to put this together has been just so illuminating and awesome.
Amazing. So what led to the decision to kick off this relaunch with a podcast?
Well, I think Measured is how we bring Book More Women to life.
Mm-hmm.
The data tells us what's happening, but not always why or how it's affecting real people.
Mm-hmm.
And, we want to build on that database foundation with the real experience and stories from the humans behind the numbers. And the podcast lets us investigate the music industry from all angles while inviting the community along to learn with us. So we're going to follow the threads of power and access to where they take us. And we're going to use, those stories and data that we uncover to inform our strategies and programs.
So what can the audience expect from season 1 of Measured?
Well, the music industry is complex and music festivals are complex. But I think once you understand the complexities of a system, you start to reveal where those best leverage points for change are.
Right.
So we're going to take a deep dive into these different aspects of the festival machine and tell the story from different angles. And, we want Measured to offer useful insights to young artists, to inspire organizers to do their best work, give fans a backstage perspective. And we're taking this journey right alongside you and hoping that it guides our future on the right direction.
What would you say success looks like for this new chapter of Book More Women?
Well, in the long term, our vision is a music industry where gender equity is expected, where representation is intentional, and artists and industry pros of all identities have equal opportunities to thrive. In the near term, I think success looks like momentum.
Right.
Staying focused on festivals, at this first phase, we want to build a community that understands how everything functions and turn that data into tools that artists and organizers can use. Our goal is to turn those numbers around again, first of all, get them going the right direction, and to support, developing artists with knowledge and opportunities and, help create the headliners of tomorrow. At the end of the day, I think this work is about people, about humans making art, and ensuring that the systems around them give them a fair chance to be seen.
So how can people support Book More Women and the Measured podcast?
Well, if you enjoyed this intro episode and want to help make the full season of Measured possible, as well as all of the other programs Book More Women is working on, head to bookmorewomen.com and you can check out and contribute to our crowdfunding campaign. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, that's at bookmorewomen, to see the edited festival posters and to get other updates. You can also learn more about me and how Book More Women started by checking out an interview I did with Carmel back in 2024 on the SHEROES Podcast. And we'll put that link and all of these links in the description of this episode for you.
Abbey, thank you so much. Congratulations once again on this exciting new chapter of Book More Women.
Thanks so much, Carmel.
Measured is a project of Book More Women, edited and produced by SHEROES Productions. Our engineer is Kelly Drake. Our theme music is by Carling Burkhout. And our executive producer is Abbey Carbonneau. Book More Women is a sponsored project of Fractured Atlas, a nonprofit arts service organization. Contributions for the charitable purposes of Book More Women must be made payable to Fractured Atlas only and are tax deductible to the extent permitted by law. I'm Carmel Holt. Thanks for listening. See you next time on Measured.